So he says, I'm writing this book because I came to Egypt. He was actually put on trial for death during the first secular regime here after the fall of the Caliphate. He was put on trial for death. The judge could not bring himself to give him the death penalty because he said, I don't feel justified in killing this man who is simply living according to his principles and speaking the truth that he believes. And he's done nothing other than that. And so he said, but we exile him. So he was exiled to Greece. He wrote a letter. This is Shaykh al-Islam, right? This is the highest position that a scholar could hold in the Ottoman Empire. He goes to Greece, he writes a letter, and in that letter, he just says, I am Mustafa Sabri, Shaykh al-Islam, and I'm asking any Muslim country to take me as a refugee or as a guest, because I have no country. Now I'm in Greece and I don't want to die in a non-Muslim land. So some Egyptian man working in the embassy got wind of this, and he said, I might lose my job, but he said, what would Christian countries do if the Pope was kicked out of Italy? You know, they wouldn't take him in. Like, this is a disgrace for us that this man has no country. So he was taken to Egypt and he began to teach there. But what he said is he was distraught by seeing in Egypt the very things that he had witnessed in Turkey. He thought Egypt, he said, he thought the lands of the Arabs would be different, but he said he found in some ways it was worse. And he actually says that they forget that this Turkish dawla, you know, that was rooted in the Turks, but it was never a nationalistic civilization. He said they spent 2/3 of their history fighting the enemies of Islam, protecting the borders of Islam. This was their civilization. It was protecting and expanding the Muslim protection. Because even the Protestants, after the Protestant Revolution, many of them migrated to countries that were held by the Ottomans, because the Ottomans didn't distinguish between Catholics and Protestants. So they could get out of persecution by going to places like Transylvania, which had the Edict of Toleration based on the Muslim idea of tolerating other religions. And we know John Locke was influenced by Edward Pocock, who was a student of the Ottoman system. And his letter on toleration was inspired by the Muslim toleration of this millet system. So he says that he found 2 weapons that they used. The first weapon was materialism, to make people think that religion was superstition and a foolish thing to believe. And he said their tools for doing this became very powerful with a lot of the material sciences that they developed. But the second tool that they used was nationalism. So he said to destroy Turkey from within, they used materialism. But to destroy Turkey from without, they used nationalism. So that the places where the Turks were protecting, like Palestine, suddenly the people in Palestine saw the Turks as occupiers. And people forget that Arabs fought against the Turks. They allied with the British and fought against the Turks. And the British promised them all these things. And much of what we're suffering now is from the betrayal of Muslims of that time. So these are the effects, and nobody wants to deal with what really happened. They just want to blame everybody else. You know, it's all somebody else's fault. But unfortunately, we inherit the troubles of the past. We inherit them. The only country that didn't, of the Arab states that were under, the only one that didn't break their ties was the Libyans. They were the only ones, which is why the Turks really loved the Libyans. In 1958, King Idris came here and actually restored the maqam of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. There's a big plaque there, 1958. A plaque that says that he came, he saw that it was in disarray because it was a period where they weren't really respecting these places as much anymore, and he redid it. But then the Libyans, in their Thawra Thawra, Iblis wala Idris, with their slogan, give us Iblis and not Idris, they overthrew a man who used to do night prayers And I know this because I know somebody who knew him personally very well, Mustafa bin Halim, who was his ambassador to Italy, who told me that he was one of the most pious people he knew. This was the man that was ruling their country. They overthrew him, Iblis wa Idris, they got Iblis, and then they overthrew this guy, you know, and now there's 1,000 Iblises. And this is what revolution, this is what he's saying. Everybody loses. Everybody loses. So we have to understand these things at a deeper level and not be fooled by slogans. One of the things that the Prophet ﷺ said, that towards the end, he said there's going to be sununa khada'a. There will be years of deception. Yu'taman al-kha'in. The treasonous one will be considered trustworthy. وَيُخَوَّنَ الْأَمِينَ. And the trustworthy one will be called a treasonous one. يُكَذِّبَ الصَّادِقِ. The one telling the truth will be deemed a liar. وَيُصَدَّقَ الْكَاذِبِ. And the one being called, the liar will be called a truthful one. This is what our Prophet warned us. So we have to be vigilant about what's being done to us as a community.